Hello, all right. Hopefully the audio is good, but we're just a couple minutes away from the Crucible reveal live stream. I'm pretty excited. You might have watched my predictions video when they first announced this, but this looks like, from the name and the theming, it looks looking like a crafting league, and oh my god, crafting leagues are my absolute favorite. I could not be more excited for this, especially with how good Recombinators were. If we're getting something that's like on par with Recombinators, or maybe this even is like a new version of Recombinators, oh my god, this could be one of my... I mean, Sentinel is one of my all-time favorite leagues, and that was at the height of the Arch Nemesis fiasco, so now that Arch Nemesis has like been mostly fixed, if we're getting like a solid crafting league now, oh man. Other than that, I'm really hoping we see the return of Ultimatum. It's been so long. It's been so long. I can't believe how long it's been since we had Ultimatum. They've told us it's coming core for so long. They brought the boss fight in just so we can get the unique items, but it's been all this time, but like we still don't have Ultimatum, and I really enjoyed that mechanic. It was cool to just... I really loved that the modifiers were these discrete effects that you could recognize by the icons. That was really cool, because then you could just very quickly just snap pick the ones that were okay for your build and, you know, have things ramp up over time. And then that boss fight, like, the boss fight was really fun, and it had a great way of interacting with all of the modifiers that you would build up over the trial. So every time you did the trial master, it was a little bit different because you had different modifiers, and each one managed to put like a cool spin on the boss fight. It was just so satisfying. So if we're getting something like that back, or I mean, if we're getting either Ultimatum back, or if Crucible is like a new take on Ultimatum, like we're doing the Ultimatum thing where we're stacking up like modifiers over waves, but then the reward is that we're crafting based on that, I think that could be really cool. I can see we got some of you in here. That's good. Not streaming to nobody. And as you can see, my stream this time, things are not horribly broken like they were when I did the reveal stream last time, where I was like cutting off like like a third of the stream. So to all of you that stuck around when things were horribly broken last time, thank you. I fixed them, so things should be better. How about that 20 stack Chaos Orbs, though? Now we can get Divine Orbs that are worth twice as much. Really excited for that. So excited. It's gonna be great. This is sort of an interesting background to the stream. This sort of swirly orange-yellow thing. I guess it's supposed to be molten lava for crafting. Looks sort of like... sort of getting like celestial vibes a bit. I don't think that's on theme with what's going on in the league, but it's a bit of what I'm getting here. I wonder if we're gonna see like an expansion of core game content in addition to the league, because we're getting a little bit of that every league now, right? Where we got the Atlas passive revamped the last couple leagues, so I guess we could see some more cool stuff on that front. I don't know how other people feel, but I kind of feel like they went a bit too far with the Atlas passives in the most recent league. Being able to stack up such high chances of a league appearing in a region to the point where you can just alch and go and still guarantee that a league mechanic appears kind of wreaked havoc on the economy. Like, Breachstones have never been worth less, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I don't know that it's necessarily an improvement over how it was before. I wouldn't be surprised to see some nerfs to the changes they made last league in Sanctum to have the occurrence chance be higher. I mean, they don't really like immediately taking things away like that for the most part, but I think it could happen. Oh, we also have they still have to re-implement the harder versions of the boss fights that you used to be able to spec into, right? Because they decided they didn't like that on the Atlas, because then you feel like you had to spec into them to do that. Like, oh my god, I totally forgot. Like, during Sanctum League, I used to love running farming Elder Guardians as sort of like a Maven rotation, where you do like all 4 Elder Guardians and then the Maven map or whatever. And I would do that with my favorite passive on the Atlas tree, the one where you got an Elder Guardian to 50%, they would go back to full and spawn another one, so you fight 2 at once. I love that one. It was like my go-to early league farming strategy, and it's just been gone. So hopefully we're going to see something that re-implements that this league, and it's not like Ultimatum where they're like, oh, we'll bring it back someday, maybe in 2 years. Surely I'm not the only one waiting for that, right? Oh, hi! Hi, Cremerox. 30 seconds. I don't know, I'm feeling good about this one. I'm thinking this could be a good crafting league and like good expansion of the Atlas passives. We'll see. Final predictions. Hi, it's Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Crafting League. More Atlas passive stuff.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games.
Already 1
Thanks
for 3.
Joining us for today's live stream as we unveil Path of Exile Crucible, which launches on April 7th on PC and Mac, and on April 12th on console. Twitch drops are enabled on today's live stream, so make sure you follow the instructions below in order to claim your Sphinx wings. Speaking of live streams, this is our last dedicated Path of Exile 1 announcement stream for around 6 months. That's because our 3.22 expansion announcement will occur during the ExileCon livestream in late July. Set yourself a reminder to tune in, because we'll also be unveiling massive amounts of information about Path of Exile 2, including revealing the date that its beta will start. Okay,
it's going to be real exciting.
Here's what you can expect. We'll start with a trailer for Crucible, followed by a deep dive on the league itself. Then we'll cover this expansion.
I don't see Ultimatum,
including the introduction of Atlas gateways and revamps to both Breach and Abyss leagues. We'll discuss changes to Path of Exile's balance metagame, including changes to the passive skill tree, its masteries, an overhaul of the Saboteur and Pathfinder Ascendancy classes, 9 powerful new Val skills, and some of the new unique items you can build around. After that, we'll cover improvements to the Ruthless game mode and the League launch boss kill event, before diving into the new Supporter Pack series. The livestream will then conclude with a Q&A session between Ziggy D and me.
No Ultimatum, rip.
After the livestream, we'll drop the full patch notes. Let's get started with the trailer for Path of Exile Crucible.
Here we go.
Hail, one of many. Eons ago, my kind walked the molten surface of this world. Now, we seek a champion.
Okay, looks like some kind of shrine in the map. Looks like Legion so far.
You must endure the heat of the Crucible. To forge weapons unlike any Raycast has ever seen.
Oh my god, it's Last Epoch style passive trees for skills, but for modifiers?
Take up the power of the Titans.
Skill trees for weapons.
Obliteration.
This gonna be crafting like legendary weapons? This rework. I mean, those didn't look that different. Oh my god, you can jump across the Atlas tree. Maybe not a crafting league then? Just new weapons with skill trees? Yeah, Path of Exile Crucible, we get it.
In Path of Exile Crucible, you'll learn about an ancient race of titans who once shaped the primordial surface of Rayclust. In this league, you will earn the ability to forge their power onto your weapons. And what form does that power take? In an iconically Path of Exile way, it's the ability to imbue your weapons with their own passive skill trees.
Oh, so you just
These
add it to a
Crucible trees
rare
can have
item.
quite an impact on your character build. For example, in addition to the regular mods on this bow, its Crucible tree grants additional physical damage, physical to chaos conversion, the Master Fletcher notable passive,
Oh my god.
improved grace effect, and level 10 lesser multiple projectiles.
What?
While this is certainly a decent tree to get, it's not even the maximum depth and could be even more optimized for your build.
How are you
In
gonna
order to forge
trade
these
for
powerful
these?
trees onto your weapons, you'll need to complete Crucible encounters. There's one in each area. Each encounter takes place at a Crucible forge. As you approach the forge, you'll have the choice of which of your equipped weapons you want to focus on. This can include ones on your alternate weapon swap if you want to improve one you're not
Oh,
currently
it has
using.
to be an equipped weapon.
After selecting a weapon, you channel it at the Crucible forge to spawn monsters. The longer you channel for, the more dangerous and rewarding the encounter becomes. As you spawn additional monsters, they combine together to create larger and more fearsome foes that grant even more experience for your Crucible passive tree. Being able to ramp up the difficulty of the encounters is a double-edged sword. While it gives you the opportunity to make rapid progress on your Crucible weapon crafting projects, it comes with significant risk to your character. It's easy to accidentally overwhelm yourself and make an encounter that is too dangerous. Channel carefully and adapt to what your character is capable of.
You can't brick the item, it's just
When you
how much
first find a weapon,
experience you
it
get.
doesn't have a Crucible tree unlocked. Channeling that weapon at Crucible encounters will unlock and reveal its tree, as well as allocating the first skill. You can only allocate one skill at each tree depth, so you'll need to decide which path through the tree is best for your build. As you get deeper into a tree, more and more experience is required to unlock skills. The final depths can take quite an investment and can only be found rarely on endgame items, but also have some of the most powerful properties. For example, this wand has 2 depth 5 skills.
So your offhand slots are going to be
One of them
really
allows all
important
damage
so you
from
can
your freezing
fish for these
pulse
good
and Eye of
ones on
Winter
like
skills for
unique
poison,
weapons or
and
something.
the other allows various brands to be attached to your summoned Reaper. There are many such modifiers to skills
What?
that will enable very interesting build combinations. In addition
That's so
to all
niche.
types of weapons, shields can also be empowered with their own Crucible trees. Here's a relatively simple low-level example. It gets a bit crazier as you approach the endgame. Speaking of the endgame, in endgame Crucible encounters, you'll occasionally find igneous geodes, currency items that can be cracked open to reveal a primeval remnant. This is a map-like item that grants access to the Forge of the Titans, the culmination of your Crucible journey. These primeval remnants always generate as rare items. Half of their mods are upsides and half are downsides. The upsides generally increase the rewards of the area or add special crafting options. For example, causing monsters to drop divination cards or magmatic ore, a form of tradable itemized Crucible tree experience. The downsides are quite punitive compared to most endgame maps. Ideally, you want to find a primeval remnant that is really rewarding upsides alongside downsides you can handle. If you don't think you'll survive a visit to the Forge of the Titans, trade the remnant away to someone else and gamble on cracking open another geode. If you survive and manage to reach the end of the area, you'll find the aforementioned forge, which allows you to merge Crucible trees on 2 items together.
What?
The way this process works is that you provide 2 items of the same class. For example, a pair of bows, a pair of shields, or a pair of one-hand axes. One of these items will be melted down and applied to the other, which will keep its regular properties. Their Crucible trees will be merged together in an unpredictable way, taking elements of each one. This is a little reminiscent of how recombinators applied to item mods, taking parts of each Crucible tree and merging them together.
Okay.
Randomly upgrading, downgrading, or
I like the sound of
mutating
this.
on the resultant tree. While this process can create some really powerful trees if you get skills you wanted from both items, it can also completely wreck your precious trees, so take care choosing which you risk combining.
But can you just combine forever so you can just keep finding...
Also, like recombinators, there are ways to manipulate the system to improve your odds at getting certain outcomes. For example, any skills that have been allocated are more likely to show up in the resultant Crucible tree.
Oh.
By default, you can only add Crucible trees to non-unique items. but it's possible to get a mod on the Forge of the Titans map that allows you to imbue a unique item with a Crucible tree, which can then be leveled up via regular Crucible encounters. To combine Crucible trees on unique items together, you'll want to find a crystalline geode and crack it open to reveal the secret higher level version of the Forge of the Titans. I probably shouldn't say too much about it, but it will let you do some interesting things with Crucible trees. There's an important thing to note about Crucible trees on unique weapons. In addition to being much harder to unlock, there's a special rule about how they can be combined. A unique weapon must be combined with another copy of the same unique weapon to merge their trees together. Because this destroys one copy, getting a good Crucible tree on a unique weapon makes it insanely valuable. It may also raise the trade value of all unique weapons by quite a lot, as players sacrifice.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Perfect Crucible trees. Occasionally, you'll find a Crucible passive skill tree with a special skill that indicates that the item will sell to vendors for a specific item in addition to its regular sale price. These vendor skills usually occur relatively deeply in the tree, so take some effort to allocate, but usually don't block skill choices.
Wow, so you're going to want two weapons in your offhands as opposed to one two-handed.
Presents you with an interesting choice about whether you want to use the item or sell it to a vendor, and whether you want to spend your Crucible experience either revealing new trees to hunt for good skills, leveling up items to use, or leveling up items to sell. Crucible also features its own unique items you can earn. For example, El Abin's Visage, a unique helmet, is special in that it's the only armor piece other than shields that can receive Crucible passive skill trees. Wearing it allows you to double down on certain properties that are only available through these trees. There are several other unique items exclusive to Crucible.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to get an enchant on it, so like...
Crucible is a dual combat crafting league with a focus on encounter difficulty.
How good is that?
Deep weapon customization.
You gonna pay for a lab runner?
That we have never seen before. Without a doubt, some of Path of Exile's most powerful weapons will be forged in Crucible. We can't wait to see what you manage to create. Like all recent Path of Exile expansions, Crucible includes a lot of changes with the goal of improving Path of Exile's endgame. One area we wanted to address was mobility on the Atlas passive tree. Often, you'll find yourself in a situation where you want to specialize in leagues that are on entirely different sides of the Atlas tree.
Yep.
Or maybe you want to
We're
focus
very
on
limited in what you can do in combination right now.
Leagues you have picked. To solve this, Path of Exile Crucible introduces Atlas Gateways. These are nodes that you can allocate on the Atlas tree that allow instant travel between two locations. There are 3 pairs of gateways, each allowing travel from the left side of the tree to the right side, or vice versa. Each end of the gateway consumes 1 Atlas skill point to allocate, but will potentially save you large amounts of travel points.
Wow, that's huge.
In this expansion, we're targeting a couple of endgame leagues that have fallen behind other leagues on the Atlas tree. Let's start with Breach. In the live version of Path of Exile, there are 5 tiers of Breachstone. In Path of Exile Crucible, we're raising the area levels of Breachstones to a much higher baseline level. 81 for elemental ones, 82 for physical, and 83 for chaos. Now that the regular Breachstones are much higher level, we have retired charged, enriched, and pure Breachstones.
Wow.
They will be converted to regular ones. We have also changed how flawless Breachstones are acquired. Previously, you could only get them from Maven invitations, but we prefer access to the hardest Breach content to actually come from playing Breach. Now there are 2 ways to get flawless Breachstones. Through blessings.
A single blessing, oh my god.
For a skill on the Atlas tree.
Wow.
We've also improved the pacing of Breach.
That's gonna make Betrayal upgrades a lot better.
Felt pretty good early on,
if they're still around.
It off in density to the point where you wanted to abandon the Breach because it just felt like not enough monsters were spawning. Our changes now keep Breaches feeling dense throughout, leaning more on the side of it feeling overwhelming towards the end of the Breach. We have also reduced the duration of Breaches so there is constant monster pressure and you can get on with your mapping sooner. There are a whole bunch of other Breach changes that you can read about in the patch notes, such as changes to the Betrayal Research Safe House, Breach Scarabs, Breach Stones from Kirik missions,
probably a
Breach
nerf
crafting option, the Fragment Stash tab, Divination cards, Breach unique items, Atlas passives, and so on.
A complete overhaul then.
Also revamping Abyss in a similar way. Abyssal Depths now always contain an Abyssal Lich.
Oh my god.
The prevailing gameplay was to check the loading screen art of an Abyssal.
Yeah, I hated that so much. It was the worst.
And bail out if it didn't. Now, the depths always contain a lich, removing the need for this step. While the rate of encountering Abyssal Liches is unchanged,
it's so
Abyssal
good.
Depths are rarer than before. However, Abysses now have a chance to spawn a Stygian Spire in place of their reward chest, which will drop all of the jewels and other items you'd normally receive.
Wow! Oh my god, I love that.
In addition, you're guaranteed to always get a 4-hole Abyss alongside your Abyssal Depths. Previously, Abyssal Depths could only spawn immediately after a single Abyssal Hole, which prevented you from getting full value from the Abyss. The Lightless Legion notable passive has been replaced with a new skill which grants Stygian Spires in your maps drop items with +1 to item level. This is intended to allow players to continue to be able to obtain item level 86 Stygian Vices and other base types as a reward for specializing in Abyss. The small passives leading up to this notable passive have also been replaced. We've done a balanced pass on Abyssal Lich encounters to make them more appropriately difficult relative to the current standard of endgame encounters. Abyss uniques have had some balance attention also, and the details are in the patch notes. Overall, these changes should ensure you can play a wider variety of leagues in the endgame, both through being able to access them more easily and because Breach and Abyss now feel far more modern and competitive with other popular league content. A big goal of the Crucible expansion is to provide a lot of new ways to build characters, and to breathe new life into older builds. To achieve this, we're doing two things. Firstly, we have created many more interesting options for one of Path of Exile's core build systems, the passive skill tree, by overhauling its masteries. Secondly, we have revamped two specific ascendancy classes. As we reviewed the masteries on Path of Exile's passive skill tree, we realized that a lot of the choices were rather bland and could be a lot more exciting. We went through the masteries one by one and tried to come up with as many interesting stats as we could, ignoring what was currently there.
Once we had a short list of high quality stats, we added in the existing ones that used to be on each mastery and picked the 6 best. All of the leftover ones have been saved for later or used in places like unique items. This process was performed on approximately half of the masteries on the tree, initially targeting the ones that needed the attention the most. Previously, some masteries only had 4 options, so we've tried to increase as many as possible to 6 options. We've also added a couple of new mastery types that we felt were missing. Let's look at an example, the life mastery choices. You can see some of the interesting new options, such as the ability to manipulate your low life and full life thresholds.
10% more maximum life.
Damage while on full life support gem, and many unique items. Getting a large increase to maximum life when you have no life on your body.
It's so good for some uniques.
Really well with a whole lot of unique items.
Yeah.
But also opens up new prefix composition options for rare body armors.
That's so good.
Armor and energy shield mastery has more options available than before. The other thing we focused on with this one is tying the mechanics together better. Instead of some being about armor and some being about energy shield, we've tried to make sure each really emphasizes having both armor and energy shield. On the Leech Mastery, we've combined the 3 increased life mana and energy shield recovery.
10% of Leech is instant.
All of them. The space we've freed up has been used to add some powerful
Return of All Pact?
a portion of your Leech applying instantly.
That's nuts, right?
Mastery also has many interesting options. Your chance to suppress spell damage becoming lucky is extremely useful before you've optimized your gear and haven't reached 100% yet. The third option rewards you for stacking more than 100%.
Phasing if you've suppressed spell damage recently? Oh boy.
Now it's something you can plan your itemization around. While looking at masteries, we noted that there were some mechanics that didn't have enough passive tree support, so we decided to add some more options and passive skill choices for those mechanics. We also wanted to grant more access to certain types of masteries in specific parts of the passive skill tree. For example, in order to allow more access to the attack mastery, we've added an attack cluster by the Templar and one between the Ranger and Shadow. We wanted to create more access to other forms of recovery such as regen and recoup, so we've added some new passive skill clusters. Note that there is now a new mastery called Recovery. We've also added more capacity for investment in certain mechanics.
Links. Who's using link skills?
Stun mitigation and marks. These
Nobody's using
passive
links.
Tree changes are just some of the ones introduced in Path of Exile Crucible. We look forward to your feedback on the rest when you check out the passive skill tree next week.
Link
While going through
skills.
ascendancy classes, we identified 2 that needed work, the Saboteur and the Pathfinder. Both have been significantly changed in Path of Exile Crucible. These changes reinforce their respective identities while adding some new options to build around. The Saboteur is definitely the ascendancy class most aligned with traps and mines, but the old version of the Saboteur made it difficult to play anything but traps or mines. The new version has more builds available, including a whole new specialization, Triggers. There are 2 notable passives.
Oh, Spellslinger?
Clockwork grants you the increased cooldown recovery rate stat, which is a pretty rare one. This is great for triggered spells as it indirectly increases their damage. This notable also makes your enemies have longer cooldowns, which can be useful in certain boss fights, for example, causing the Maven's memory game to occur less often. The Perfect Crime notable passive summons 2 trigger bots, which override the location of where a triggered spell is being cast, and instead causes it to trigger twice, once from each of their locations.
What? Oh my
The layout of
god.
Saboteur's trap and mine ascendancy passives has changed, so that there aren't separate 4-pointers for traps and mines. Now each one has a 2-pointer that is connected to the same shared 4-pointer. We have also completely reworked Bomb Specialist to be specifically tied to area damage, so it's a slightly more general skill. It both
Oh
gives
man,
you
maybe
some
I'm
area
playing a
damage
spell
as well as
slinger
some
in
defense
Crucible.
against incoming area damage against you. The Pathfinder has been overdue for some attention, especially with recent features such as concoction skills that she could get the ability to specialize in. We also wanted the Flask-themed ascendancy to have a proactive way of improving Life Flask usage. Master Distiller allows you to turn most of your skills into concoction-like effects. Master
What?
Surgeon now effectively gives all of your Life Flasks the Enduring effect, previously only
I need to
found
go
on
back
Fire
and read that
Flasks.
note. That sounded
Finally,
interesting.
both of the major Flask-themed branches now have some form of Flask Charge recovery.
Is that flask every...
There are other
Is that 2
improvements to the
points now instead of
Pathfinder
4?
ascendancy, such as Nature's Reprisal, now interacting with Wither to improve all forms of your chaos damage, rather than just
It used to be
attack
4,
rolls.
right? To get the flash charges
Check out the
every
full
3
details in the
seconds?
patch notes that we'll be posting after the live stream.
Because, I mean, that's a very strong ascendancy.
Path of Exile Crucible introduces 9 new Val skills. Last expansion, there was an emphasis on melee Val skills. In Crucible, we're making sure that many other types of builds get new skills to build around. Val skills let us introduce quite powerful effects that we couldn't normally give to a regular skill that can be used constantly. They also implicitly act as a buff to the underlying skill. Val Absolution upgrades one of your Sentinels of Absolution into an Apparition of Innocence. You can only have one apparition at once, but just check out these massive AoE skills it uses.
It's pretty big. Wow.
Val Arctic Armor instantly encases you in ice, preventing non-instant actions including movement, but granting massive damage reduction against hits. After a
Val
short duration,
Arctic
it also
Armor?
starts to regenerate your energy shield and mana at a fast rate. Both the damage reduction and regeneration last for a few seconds.
I mean,
or
it is
until
pretty
you
good in
hit
boss
3 times.
fights.
It cannot be manually cancelled. Because the skill is instant, it's a great emergency button against dangerous boss slams. It also makes you count as being frozen, despite Arctic Armor normally making you freeze immune. Having another way to self-freeze may be of interest to a few mad scientist build creators in the community. Val Lightning Arrow fires a barrage of piercing projectiles that cause lightning to strike nearby targets whenever they hit an enemy.
Val
After a short
Lightning
amount of time,
Arrow.
or when they collide with terrain, their arrows randomly change direction and continue flying.
I mean,
This occurs
whenever
a
an
number of
already
times
good
before the
skill
arrows
gets a Val
expire.
version, it's
Each arrow can hit the
usually
same
pretty
target once
good.
per redirect. Because the arrows travel for a set time before redirecting, rather than a set distance, projectile speed modifiers affect the distance traveled. High projectile speed lets you
Oh
clear
my
out
God.
huge areas with them, while reducing your projectile speed increases the chance of them hitting the same target multiple times. With very low projectile speed, the skill can hit a single target 20 plus times. Val Reap conjures a ring of scythes that deal
Val
damage to all
Reap?
enemies in a circular area. The scythes leave behind a pool of blood that deals heavy physical damage over time to enemies standing
Oh
in it,
boy.
and for a short duration after they leave it.
Oh,
Val
that's
Reap
so
instantly
good against
grants a large
bosses
number of
then.
The blood charges used by normal Reap on use, as well as temporarily higher maximum blood charge capacity, substantially powering up the regular version of the skill. Path of Exile Crucible introduces
Ooh,
5
Val
other skills
Reap.
revealed
Oh,
in
okay.
Val Animate Weapon,
Spell
Val
Slinger,
Domination,
Spell Slinger Reap?
Val
Oh, but then
Regeneration Totem,
Val
and
can't be
Val
triggered.
Firestorm.
Can you? I think you can manually cast it though. Then
This
still,
expansion
right?
also
Maybe.
introduces more
Oh
than
man, I gotta
50
look into
unique
that.
items. There are 3 in particular I'd like to show you today. Blood Price is a unique helmet that has a new effect, reserving enemy maximum life. This does exactly what it implies, causing nearby enemies to start at 92% maximum life. While this increases your clear speed against all enemies, it's especially useful against bosses. The helmet's drawback is that it reduces your maximum life, but provides decent life regeneration and block and stun recovery to counteract this.
Can you just swap the helmets
Tainted
after
Pact is an amulet
they've
that
lost
causes
8%
chaos damage over
life?
time to heal you while you're leeching life.
Like,
While the amulet provides a decent amount of life leech itself, it'll certainly require a few tricks to unlock its full potential. Widow Hail is a unique bow that is different from any other bow in Path of Exile.
what?
As a weapon, it does basically no base damage and doesn't grant any stats of its own, but it does dramatically increase the power of mods provided by your quiver. Needless to say, this could produce some pretty ridiculous outcomes with good rare or unique quivers. We'll reveal some of the other new uniques over the coming week. Ruthless is a game mode that we released alongside the
Oh god,
second
if they address the
expansion late
challenges
last year.
thing.
It's designed around extreme item scarcity and is challenging because you're constantly behind the item power curve. So far, it has found a very passionate audience of players who love how rewarding item drops feel in such an austere environment. We have some small improvements to Ruthless and Path of Exile Crucible. Firstly, Eternal Orbs are back in Ruthless.
What?
These are an extremely powerful currency item that allows you to imprint an
What?
item and restore it if you're unhappy with the result of crafting. We disabled these game-wide 7 years ago because they were far too powerful when combined with all of the different crafting options.
Can you
Path of Exile
transfer
offered
them
at the
to
time.
standard?
Ruthless does not have the base game's crafting feature set, so we have enabled Eternal Orbs to drop in Ruthless, albeit extremely rarely.
Or is there no way
Ruthless
to...
now has its own set of challenges to complete. Like the ones in early Path of Exile, there were a total of 8, and they're very difficult. Like we've done in the past,
Completely
we're
separate
hosting a boss
set of
event at the
challenges.
start of the Crucible Challenge League. It'll be held in
Is it its
Ruthless
own
Hub
rewards or
and
the
Solo
same
Sofa,
rewards?
And will require you to kill both the
I have so many
Uber
questions.
Serious and the Uber Eater of Worlds, making it by far the hardest event we have ever run. The first place winner will get to work with our design team to add a new unique item to Path of
Can you
Exile.
not transfer a character from Ruthless to Standard? It must be that there's no way to get those Eternal Arms into Standard, or else people would play Ruthless just to get those Eternal Orbs. They're worth like a fortune in Standard, right? Like,
that can also be sold at their discretion. If you'd like to enter the event, just create a character in Ruthless.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Eternal Orbs are like worth more than mirrors in Standard or something.
On the weekend of July 29 to 30 New Zealand time, which is July 28 to 29 for much of the rest of the world, we're going to be hosting ExileCon 2023 in Auckland, New Zealand. While tickets to the in-person event are very hard to get, we'll be streaming the entire event for free. At ExileCon, we'll reveal our latest updates on Path of Exile 2, Path of Exile Mobile, and the next Path of Exile 1 expansion. Make a note in your calendar, tell your friends, and don't miss it. The second day of the Path of Exile livestream culminates in a competitive race event between some of Path of Exile's best players. In order to select the 4 competitors, we're going to run qualifier events during the months of April and May. The winner of each event will receive a VIP ExileCon ticket, return flights to Auckland and accommodation, and will compete in the race event live on stage. All 4 qualifiers in the final event will be run on the 3.21.
Are they gonna have Einhard vamp for like 30 minutes at the start this time? Hopefully they
You'll be able to read more in the patch notes.
hopefully they don't have the same technical difficulties they did that led to that.
Practice hard, compete in the qualifier events, and hopefully win your place on stage in July.
Alongside Path of Exile Crucible, we're introducing a few new types of microtransactions.
New types.
An example I wanted to describe today is that of mannequins. These are
Oh, people are gonna love this.
Show off sets of microtransactions you have assembled. You can equip them with your spare micros
they're gonna
and
make
pose
so
them in
much
various
money.
ways. It's also possible to swap your entire outfit with a mannequin's one, which lets you easily store micro sets to be retrieved
If
later.
they have an item showcase one that lets you show off an item, oh my god.
Other new microtransactions coming up include wrapping paper, which lets you gift wrap items to hand to other players, or even drop in town for random people to pick up. Today we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs.
Why aren't item showcase microtransactions a thing? Like, it just has the tooltip up, like, on your screen, like you're in someone's hideout showing off the cool item you crafted or something.
Crucible League, and will leave the store forever when it ends.
I feel like people would love
As
that.
always, the microtransactions in these packs are purely cosmetic and do not affect your character's power or progression in any way. The Lithomancer series of supporter packs contains 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Tunnel Bear isn't just adorable, he will also take the place of the Crawler in Delves,
What?
mapping your surroundings and laying down cables.
What?
Apparently, this is what happens when your bear gets into a kilo of sulfite. Might explain what happened to Nico.
What?
Exorcise rare and unique demons when you hit them. The souls of defeated demons are banished to the depths below.
I might need that Delve Bear.
The ancient stone of the Lithomancer's armor set crumbles when you take damage, revealing the crimson core inside. The stone reforms if you haven't taken damage recently. A sip from the ancestral granite flask causes a Karui ancestor to appear and surround you in protective wards. The ancestral portal encases you in molten armor when you travel through it.
Talamoana Warrior.
Rallies you to battle and
Oh my
honestly
god.
seems to have an unhealthy obsession with combat.
Go forth and conquer.
Ever want to practice running away from volatiles? The gunpowder foot attachment straps explosives to your legs, dispersing lit gunpowder behind you. Be careful, you can only outrun it for so long before it catches up. The Enchanter Pack series also has 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Parrot of Exile pet parrots your exile. We'll just let it speak for itself.
It would be wrong to do that here.
What?
Drinking from the bottled Storm Jade Flask encases you in a surging tornado, churning up the ground in your wake. If you
That
stand
parrot seems
perfectly
like it would be
still
so
while wearing the
annoying.
enchanted armor set, it will attract butterflies to flutter around you. Be careful not to disturb them. Sick of high-fiving giant purple appendages? The Ritualist's Breach Ring visually transforms breaches you find into occult summoning circles.
Oh,
The
wow.
Enchanter's crafting bench replaces the normal crafting bench in your hideout with a suite of tools fit for a master artisan. The various crafting stations burst into life as you use them. If you've ever wanted to remind your character who's really in charge, the Puppeteer's back attachment has you covered. It truly is the sinister presence pulling the strings. These new packs are available right now at pathofexile.com/purchase. Purchases like these directly fund
I'm gonna have to see how much that bear costs.
1 and 2. Meanwhile, the Forge
Puppet
and
one
Gemming
seems pretty
packs
cool,
leave the store
too.
forever at the launch of the Crucible League, so now's your last chance to purchase them. Thank you for your continued support. We're about to start the Q&A with Ziggy D. After that, we'll post the full patch notes for Path of Exile Crucible. As we approach release next week, our community team will post Crucible's challenges, information on how to update your item filters, more skill gem details, and information on how to prepare for Crucible's launch. On release weekend, we expect to launch the new mystery box and this season's Kerrick's Vault Pass, which can be purchased with points and
Kerrick's
has a new
Vault
free
Pass.
track available. Thanks for joining the stream today. and
So,
checking out
it's
Path
not
of
the
Exile
crafting
Crucible.
league
We
that
can't
I'd
wait to
hoped
forge some
for,
powerful weapons with you next
in
week.
that it doesn't affect the
Q&A
way
will
you
start
create
shortly, so please
items
get
at
your questions
all.
ready.
But it does seem like it takes some of the interesting, fun things from Recombinators, where you're like leveling up these items in your offhand in the background and then just continually merging them, trying to, and you can merge them onto a fully crafted item. Like, this is just an extra thing that you can do on top of everything else, like when you're done with an item, and then just keep merging until you get an amazing skill tree. It does mean that you're probably going to want to invest in making like your perfect endgame weapon as fast as possible, because put all this time and effort into merging a skill tree onto an item, and then you like want to go upgrade that weapon for a better one. It's like you're losing out on all the cool skill tree stuff you did. So getting your sort of best in slot end game weapon as fast as possible is going to be really important. And then I guess the idea is you can either use your offhand to build up fodder for merging, or try to go for those skills that let you vendor them for currency. It's sort of a weird way to tack on like currency generation to this league, because it kind of, you know, because it's a league mechanic that doesn't really generate like huge explosions of loot, presumably, aside from just adding some number of monsters to your maps. No, I mean, Sanctum isn't going to be core anymore, and Ultimatum's not coming back. No return of Recombinators. Seems kind of like a low-key sort of challenge league. Because the Atlas revamps, I guess we have the Breach and Abyss revamps, which seem, I mean, they seem minor. It kind of feel like the Abyss one kind of feels like Abyss has been kind of broken like for a while now. It kind of just feels like they fixed it. I mean, they tried last league with all those Abyss passes they put on the Atlas tree. Like, what if we just juice it to insane levels? And that wasn't really enough to get people to care. So they fixed the problems with it, but I don't know. I don't know that that's that exciting. I mean, the new league looks fun. You know, click a thing, get lots of monsters, get to merge up, make some insane weapons. But you need to do something special in order to unlock the trees on unique weapons. It feels like you really, really do not want to be using a unique weapon this league, because you're gonna have to buy so many copies of that unique weapon. You have to spend extra in order to unlock the tree on the unique weapon, and it's still gonna be pure RNG whenever you merge them. It feels like you're gonna be asking for trouble if you go for that. Because if you're just using a regular weapon, you can just dual wield like a regular like a wand or something. You can just dual wield 2 wands in your offhand and just continuously level them up until you get a good skill tree to merge. Whereas for unique, it's like every single time you want to even just try for a good skill tree in the offhand, you're gonna have to get one of these unique maps that lets you unlock it, run and beat it to unlock it, and then level it all the way up. And it's gonna require more experience to do that. It feels weird that they're doing that, because it's not like builds that use unique weapons are inherently stronger than builds that use rare weapons. In fact, I would say that at the top end, builds that use like really insanely crafted rare weapons are better, like they have a higher top end ceiling. So it feels kind of strange that they're putting all these restrictions onto unique weapons. It makes me wonder if the unique weapons might have like special skills depending on what particular unique weapon it is that might make them like especially more powerful. Because if it's the same pool, it's like, well, yeah, the unique weapons are getting more powerful, but they're getting more powerful by the same amount that a non-unique weapon is, so like what's the big deal? Then again, they showed some of these upgrades being discrete effects, like as opposed to, you know, adding, you know, 10% increased physical damage or something. Something that's like, well, supported gems are, socketed gems are supported by level 10 whatever. There might be some really interesting synergies with specific unique weapons that bring them to the next level. Especially, I guess as well, added flat damage onto a weapon to unique weapons that don't have it but give you huge percentage scaling increases might be ridiculously powerful. So there might be tricky things you can do there. I'd have to sort of look through at the unique weapons and look at the data mining when we figure out what's available. There might be something there, but it seems like it's going to be a lot of extra hoops to jump through. Especially because if you're doing a rare weapon, like, then you can sell all of these extra maps you get, or these things that let you apply them to unique weapon to people that need them. So not only are you not spending the currency, but you're turning the league mechanic into a currency maker, because you're going to be getting those just from doing the league mechanic to level up your offhands anyways. So it's a question of, do you want to be spending money from that mechanic or making money from that mechanic? And I kind of know where I fall. So, I mean, also that ascendancy changed to the what was it, the saboteur being focused on triggered skills. Oh my god. I mean, having all your triggered skills trigger additionally from 2 extra points, like, does that just triple the damage of your skills? Like if you're going to Spellslinger build? I mean, how insane does that get? Because I've had a lot of fun playing Spellslinger builds in the past, but recently, they've not, ever since, I guess, Expedition, Spellslinger just, like, died. They killed it. Once you had to actually spend the mana for the skills that you were triggering, it just completely fell out of the meta. But... did I just hear... Oh, there we go. Finally, Q&A. Oh, we're just sitting here looking.
G'day Exiles, Ziggy here. Welcome back. I'm joined here once again by Chris Wilson. How you going this morning, Chris?
Going well, thanks. Thanks for hosting.
That was a pretty spicy, hot reveal stream. The final one before ExileCon, and the last reveal apart from ExileCon's reveal for PoE 1 potentially?
Yeah, well, we'll be having, basically, during the keynote for ExileCon, obviously we'll be dumping all the juicy Path of Exile 2 info, but after that we'll have essentially the Path of Exile 1 3.22 expansion livestream taking place from the main stage there.
The ending of an era. It's kind of bittersweet. A decade of Path of Exile action at this point coming to a close, but moving into Path of Exile 2, obviously very exciting.
I mean, Ziggy's talking as though
probing into that
3.22
much
is
because
confirmed
that is
final
ExileCon.
PoE 1
So now
league,
let's talk
but
a bit about
I don't know
Crucible.
that it has been yet.
Has there been any reference to Titans and this very early stage of Rayclestian history before now, or is this kind of new ground that you folks are exploring this time around?
We like to come up with a mixture of taking something that's referenced and then expanding on it. And I don't want to spoil too much of the investigation of where this is referenced in the game, but we recommend looking into the Red Blade Warbands faction. That's a good breadcrumb place to pick up.
The lore experts can begin their investigations there. So the main feature, I think, of Crucible is the power that it's offering players here. How much power is there in Crucible, and are there any drawbacks to that power?
Well, you can definitely view this as pretty strict power creep on weapons. Let's just say that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there haven't been Path of Exile weapons this powerful before. So you're not sacrificing anything by having a weapon tree on the weapon. It's just purely upside. But many of the individual skills do come with their own downsides, and you can choose whether to allocate those or not. And so on a weapon by weapon and skill by skill basis, you're definitely going to have to make decisions about what's best for your build.
When it comes to designing like power that has drawbacks versus doesn't have drawbacks, how do you decide which route to go?
We feel that having hard decisions about weapons and build choices and skill use is really interesting. It causes you to have to adjust your build around drawbacks. We don't really want to make a game where you linearly just get the ability to kill monsters more quickly without having to think. We like the idea of finding a choice you can make where you're like, like this will increase my power, but I have to work around something else. Like potentially there's a skill that increases your fire damage, but makes it so that you have slightly lower fire resistance. Not a large drawback to work around, but it pauses you for a second and causes you to think, where can I get the resistance elsewhere? Now, I want to emphasize many of the skills here don't have drawbacks. This isn't like, say, Scourge, where there's a corresponding drawback to every single one. It's just the case that for the powerful ones, we've put
Scourge was
drawbacks
a
on
big
them so that
miss.
there's a decision that you have to make. And it's typically the ones near the end of the trees that have the drawbacks, and so they don't really block your choices very much early on.
Yeah, it feels like a a big difference compared to Scourge in that regard. But I've always thought power creep is good when it's interesting, when it offers you like different decisions and an interesting extra layer of customization. Do you have any more like most ridiculously powerful Crucible trees or nodes that you've seen in testing so far?
There are some pretty cool combos. For example, if you found a skill that dramatically increases your cast speed at the cost of lowering your damage, then you may want to use, say, Summon Raging Spirits, because then your increased cast speed means you're casting way more of them, doing way more damage.
Seems pretty
and
good.
The decrease to your damage doesn't affect the damage of your Raging Spirits, so in that case, you completely bypass that drawback and get something that's better value. We've also got some quite interesting conditional skills. One's like, there's one I believe that grants movement speed if your dexterity is lower than 100. And so if you're able to make a build that doesn't have 100 dexterity, like for example, you're just pure intelligence or pure strength, then you can easily take advantage of just a free
I feel
movement
like
speed boost.
most builds
I wonder what the option is for low int characters.
are trying to hit 100 in each stats. That sounds like it'd be
Ever go
difficult.
core in Path of Exile, or is it just too powerful? Like it seems, I look at this and I think, no way is that going core.
We intentionally do not have any discussions internally about whether something's going core until we've let people actually play the league and get some feedback on it, because it's premature if we think, yeah, this can go core, and then everyone hates it, or vice versa, then that's an issue. So we throw it out there, see what people think.
It's a big
When we
difference
do
from
integrate
last
leagues with the
week when you
base
said
game, we typically
Sanctified
do
Relics
make
weren't
changes to
going
make them
core.
appropriate for integration. Like one of the many topics for this coming year is what are we doing about Sanctum, for example? And certainly there's discussion there about how we would make Sanctum appropriate for base game integration if it is going core.
With these items having these Crucible trees and everything, maybe the league doesn't go core, but these will go to standard in some capacity. Will they work in standard? How will that work?
They will work in standard, yes.
Ooh.
So you can rip them from hardcore to standard right away.
It's going to be good fun.
It's worth noting you can't level them up or allocate nodes any further in standard. Like you probably want to get the tree allocated correctly before you do rip it to standard.
Oh my
But
god, they're gonna get a good skill tree in hardcore, and they're gonna recombinate some mirror tier shit onto it in standard. I'm calling it now.
The end game of this is to level up multiple different weapons, selecting the best nodes, and then combining them together until you get like a blend of your perfect ideal nodes. And I imagine that could take a while to get the perfect one.
Certainly, yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff that can happen that we learned from recombinators. So there's quite a big grind to get perfect stuff. And then when you're looking at it on uniques, for example, the grind is even larger. Like we're really excited to some extent about how the concept of, let's say you want to have a like Starforge or something that's got the best tree on it. How would you actually do that? And it requires quite a concerted effort from most of the community of online players to achieve that, but it's possible.
Now, can you respec or change those Crucible node allocations?
Yeah, if a skill has been allocated,
Oh.
like as in you've chosen the skill, you've got all the experience towards it, you're gaining the benefit from it, and so on, then you can scour it with an orb of scouring. So that will unallocate that last node there.
Oh.
And then for the ones that you're working towards that you haven't allocated yet,
You have to
you can
scour
instead
the item.
retarget the effects, the efforts of the next Crucible encounter you do towards a different node. And I wish I had a graph up so I could demonstrate it. But essentially, if I'm halfway through leveling up to one of the two choices I have at a certain intersection, and I instead want to work towards the other one, I can just freely swap across. And once it's allocated, I have to use a scour to undo it and get that experience back.
You
Excellent,
scour
that makes sense.
the item, or do you
nodes
scour
available
the
on two-handed
node?
weapons more powerful than one-handed weapons? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just doing a quick dev check to make sure I wasn't making stuff up. Yeah, nodes on two-handed weapons are more powerful than one-handed weapons. You could think
Makes
of it
sense.
as, broadly speaking, if you have a two-handed weapon, you're getting the same rough power that you would from having a one-handed weapon dual-wielded or with a shield.
Certainly makes sense. And that kind of like feeds into the next question. Like quivers aren't craftable because a bow is a two-hander and gets that power level, I assume.
Correct. Yeah, we had the choice there of, do we want a bow to be balanced like a one-hand weapon or balanced like a two-hand weapon? And we thought, well, probably balance it like a two-hand weapon and just ignore quivers. It means that we can double down on having powerful bow effects, and players only have to, in that case, craft a tree on one item.
Did you ever feel like maybe we should give a special exemption to face breakers and similar items that have you not equip a weapon?
It's been discussed, but we don't want to have a philosophy that every Path of Exile league must work on literally 100% of builds to its fullest potential, because that really constrains us to really watered down leagues. So in a case here where a Facebreaker character potentially just doesn't get a boost like the other characters do, I mean, they can still play just like they could last league, except they're not getting to enjoy the main hand weapon damage they're getting from this. They can obviously still craft a shield or various unique items.
Yeah. Now, Crucible's like these passives specific to weapon types. I assume bows and melee weapons will have different nodes because they want different things. But what about like swords compared to axes, or minion ones compared to non-minion ones?
Yeah, so essentially weapon types do have mod restrictions. So the examples you give are reasonable. The bows and melee weapons have different ones. Minion ones, caster ones, bows all have their own special passives. I believe in Path of Exile there isn't a lot of direct difference between swords and axes that would cause there to be many skill differences here. So those ones are very similar, but we have tried to make sure it's all sensible. You're not going to get stuff on a weapon that's irrelevant to that weapon.
That could be interesting
Great.
for convoking
Will
wads.
that
There's a bunch of
unique
minion
Crucible
stuff in
helmet,
there.
Elabin's Visage, just have a mixture of everything, or how does that work?
That one gets shield ones.
Oh, okay. So shield probably, I assume, then has a more defensive oriented.
Yeah, I believe that it gets shield ones, but it can't give you like static local block and various other bits and pieces that wouldn't work very well.
Now, on unique items, once you add a Crucible tree to a unique item in the Primeval Remnant map, can you progress the tree and unlock nodes in regular Crucible content encounter, or do you have to keep doing the maps?
You can unlock nodes the regular way. So basically, doing that map, if you get the mod on it that enables you to put a Crucible tree on a unique, and I should add that's a moderately common mod, but certainly requires you to get lucky and get it, then you've kind of unlocked the ability for that unique to then have a tree that's explorable. At that point, you can then just go back to regular content and your regular endgame maps and level it up. It's only when you need to get a second copy of that unique unlocked and or do combining that you need to go back to the Primeval Remnant maps.
Now, viewers are always looking for clever ways around the system. I saw one that was if you take a item that already has a Crucible tree and chance it into a unique, does that bypass the Primeval map element? Or are you locked from doing that? It does.
Oh.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, might be some stuff with ancient orbs there.
Any solution here that involves more gambling from the players is happy with us.
Oh boy. This is.
We have some chat questions on these topics.
Oh, you orb of chance it, and then you ancient orb to get the unique you want. Oh, that's actually really exciting.
With those, or are they locked out?
Okay.
So there's some fun stuff you can do in the higher tier version of the endgame map, the one that's really hard to get. And an example here, I mean, we don't want to spoil too much, but an example, I believe, is that there is a mod which enables you to use, is it a mod or a base property?
It's a mod on the map item.
Right, a mod on the map item that enables you to interact with corrupted items, for example. And so there are exceptions that you can bypass. I still believe you cannot do anything with mirrored items, right?
No, but if you mirror...
Oh, they learned from recombinators on that one.
Yeah, so mirroring an item does copy the tree, but once you've got the item mirrored, it's unmodifiable.
Okay, will you... this is a question, I think, for Ruthless. We'd be able to imprint Crucible trees.
Yes, I don't see why not.
All right, cool. Will Dancing Dervish benefit from the passive tree while the item is disabled? This is kind of feeds into questions like about energy blades and things like that as well, where you've got weird contextual changes in how a weapon is used and classified.
We certainly had bugs related to putting energy blades in the Crucible. That was a fun time.
Oh.
Always.
It was pretty-
Always.
Energy Blades doesn't work. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah. We'll have to look into it. I mean, I'm certain the QA team have gone through everything and fixed it all, but that wasn't percolated up to me. But we'll make sure the sensible outcome applies.
Talking now about trade a bit, how will trading items with Crucible trees work? Will you be able to search for nodes on the trade site?
We are trying to get that functionality, but it's worth noting the way that this works is the trade site is put together by one of our staff members who's very busy, and he only gets the copy of the league to go and do the trade site stuff like yesterday kind of situation. So he has a week to get
Poor
Crucible support
employee.
working, and so we're working on it. It's difficult in this case. We normally can easily within a week sort out any itemization stuff that came from a league, and in this case it's quite complicated, as you can imagine. So we have no promises there, but yeah, of course we wanted to work on the trade side. And it's worth noting we do have an API, so if the public want to take the API and implement it better than us or faster than us, they're welcome to do so. But in the meantime, yeah, we'll try to get it up, and we want it so that people can easily identify certain nodes and trade for the items. And my expectation is that it will probably be straightforward to find items with a specific node, but doing complicated searches involving combinations of nodes and other stuff will certainly not be possible initially. And so I think that the worst case scenario is players are going to be able to find a bunch of items with a node that they're looking for and then manually examine them to work out which one they actually want to trade for. And that's not a terrible compromise. In fact, it's personally how I prefer it to work, so the trade is a bit sticky.
I know. The poor developer.
I know.
I imagine it's quite a nightmare on the web dev front, but I hope they take our energy and Path of Building also take our energy. Now, magmatic ore was something that was kind of just subtly referenced in there. It was said to be a way of having tradable, itemized Crucible
Presumably
tree
it's like
experiences.
capacitor's lenses, right?
Hilarious comment. Can you tell us anything more about what these are and what they do?
Right, so it's Crucible tree experience rather than experiences, which means you gain experience for the tree that you've got. So you consume the magmatic ore, and it levels up your item as though you'd done encounters. And so it's worth noting, this is not meant to be the efficient way to level up items, right? It's certainly not the case that people are going to bypass the encounters and just go and trade for these and they never have to actually play. This is a really inefficient way of doing it, but it is possible. If you're currency rich and time poor and need to find a way to get that last bit of experience, then this is a way to do that. It's kind of like a facetor's lens being a single use item that grants the experience. And I suspect that, it's obviously going to be priced in the economy based on how useful it is, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be the primary way that you level these items up.
Right, gotcha. I mean, I feel like if there's a way of efficiently playing the game by not playing the game, someone will figure it out. In general.
Yeah, it's dangerous for us to add, but we do like the idea of a limited amount of tradability here, and there's various ways to get it as well, which is interesting. Like there's cell nodes on the trees, as we call them, the ones that you can vend. You can vend the item to get some. There's mods on the endgame maps, and it helps a bit because when we were designing the endgame map, we didn't want the individual monsters you're fighting there to work towards leveling up a Crucible item when you're already expected to bring multiple Crucible items in with you in order to combine the trees together.
Right. Those nodes that allow you to vendor items for different rewards, it's a clever solution to the problem of why engage with the mechanic if you don't have an item that you actively want to forge right now. So how often do you find these nodes, and are they always substantial rewards, or are they some smaller ones as well, like a few Alks or a Chaos Orb?
It's worth noting, we believe that people always will have items they want to forge, and the goal of these vendor nodes is to tempt them away from that. Like at any stage, you could be working towards making the best item on the realm, but instead, oh, there's a divine orb if I just sink in a bunch of encounters into getting that. And so it's a job well done of these nodes if you are sitting there getting, currency rather than actually making the most broken items. Having said that, we suspect people will work out the value of the broken items and realize those are worth going for. In terms of how often you find them, they're mostly in the end game, and they're not too common. Like, you're not going to be sitting there with a stash full of them trying to, just swim in currency. But at the same time, you'll probably have access if you need one and you don't have a thing you particularly want to focus on at the moment. It's just so encounters don't feel entirely wasted. There are also some cool little tricks and combos that we aren't going to delve into, but it's worth having a look at that. In terms of what types of currency,
It's various currency, starting at mid-tier stuff. If you do find things like Chaos Orbs, they'll be in larger quantity, and you'll have to do the math of basically how much experience am I getting versus what the
I mean,
currency
it seems
payoff
like
is
it'll
versus
just be
what
a
other
random payout
opportunities I
when you
have in my
find a
time
good
at the
one.
moment. And it'll be straightforward to work out which ones you're wanting to do and which ones you're wanting to trade away.
On the maps side of thing, how rare are those like geodes that you can crack to get those maps, the like end game content of this?
So there's 2 tiers, and it's worth noting the acquisition here is subtly different than the way we normally do these maps. Like, these are always rare, and they come through this stacked deck like currency item, which is the geode that you crack open. And because it comes through the currency item, your ability to find rare items doesn't affect the rate that you find these. Like, you're getting just currency essentially to get them. And then there's the the unwrapping experience of seeing what the mods are on it. Now, the lower tier one is something you'll certainly play in maps often, right? Like, it's, you're not finding it every map. Maybe you're not even finding it every 4 or 5 maps, but you are finding it pretty commonly. So you're getting a lot of access to combining trees together. The higher tier one, on the other hand, is harder to get because that lets you do some really interesting stuff. So that one is certainly pitched quite a lot rarer than the first one.
And you're being pretty coy on these maps and
Yeah,
what they
he
entail
is.
and what the higher
Yeah.
version does now.
And this is for a few reasons, right? Like, first of all the rates I'm talking about here, like, they're changing in this last week. This last week is the point where we massage it from being this works and is cool into a fine machine that works perfectly with the right, economic implications and so on. We're starting the alpha shortly, like, in 10 minutes kind of thing. And that's going to give us really good feedback there. We've got a week of iteration now that everything is working and great, and so things will change. There will be more mods added, there'll be mods removed. And so if I go into too much detail of listing every mod, it's just going to be wrong a week from now when we've had time to really hone it.
Fair enough. Let's talk a bit about the challenge of this league. So, the longer you channel the Crucible Forge in a map encounter, the more dangerous it becomes. What makes the monsters dangerous here?
So as you channel it, more monsters are spawned, and they combine into larger, more impactful monsters. So
Oh.
higher tier monsters here, we've got an internal tiering system. The higher tier monsters are generally more likely to be magic, rare, or unique. And the longer you channel, the more damage and damage reduction every monster gets. Also, more difficult encounters are more rewarding. So generally speaking, play the hardest encounters you can. But it's worth noting, and
Which
this
is
is
to
an
say,
interesting question
completely
everyone
max
comes
them
up
out
with, is there a
every
button I
time.
can click to bypass the channeling and just have the hardest difficulty encounter, right? Fair enough, no one likes having to wait a few seconds, but it's worth noting the hardest difficulty encounter will probably smear you to the wall. We want, and this may be wishful thinking because some Path of Exile players are very capable, but we're trying very hard to make it so that the highest difficulty encounters are significantly harder than League content that you may have accidentally run into in the past. Now, of course, you don't need to max it out like that. Maybe only do that if you have ridiculous twink items or something. We are also trying to signal this in the UI. This wasn't shown in the video, but we are having kind of like a temperature concept where the harder it's getting, the more you see the UI getting a bit angry at you. And so I can generally handle about this amount of difficulty, and you've got an idea of where your character falls on the scale. You're certainly going to want to go as hard as you can, but our goal here when designing these risk versus reward leagues is to kill your character. We want to set it up so you overcommit and get nothing, because that way you'll learn your abilities, and it's a little less gifty than if we just had every encounter succeedable.
Explains why there's so
It's
many
like
on death
all over again
effects.
with players putting sticks in their own front tires and being like, "Oh no, why have I crashed?" Oh. Cool.
Yes.
On that note, then, what happens if you fail a Crucible encounter? Is there some risk reward aspect here?
They
outside of
despawn
dying?
or
You only get the Crucible tree experience if you complete the encounter, but your item is not a risk. We weren't moderately safe with that. So essentially, if you make an encounter that's too hard, you might lose experience on your main character or lose your hardcore character or something if you die. But realistically, the only thing you're practically missing out on is finishing the encounter to get the experience.
Now, I noticed on the Primeval Remnant map teaser, there was a mod players cannot suppress spell damage. I know the intention is to make these maps very challenging, but how do you approach making monsters harder versus disabling aspects of builds or hampering the player when it comes to designing difficulty?
So the mods on the maps are meant to be very dangerous. Like, we picked mods here that are like expedition remnants almost. Like, we want something that's very challenging. But you get fewer of them than on a regular map because half of them are upsides. So 6 modded map here has 3 upsides, 3
doesn't that
downsides.
just mean you have to
and
trade half of
the
them?
downside
and
ones,
half of them do
some of them
nothing.
will raise the difficulty of the monsters, usually by a bunch, and some of them will hamper your build's defenses or potentially make your build not work in the map. But it's worth noting that stuff like spell suppression is more of a hampering your defenses than saying you can't kill monsters. So certainly going into no spell suppression map when you rely on it takes away one of your defensive attributes. Like, be careful about that. But it's not necessarily completely breaking it for you. You're going to have to make decisions about which to play. And we strongly prefer that way of designing it. If we have to make it so that every map is playable on every character without really imposing any difficulty, then it just becomes a bit of mush. And so, in this case, you will occasionally open a geode, look forward to doing the map, and realize it's better for your friend to do it, and maybe you'll trade with one that you can do. And if you're playing an SSF and don't have the ability to trade, then you just have to make decisions about whether you run it or don't run it as the other option, or run it carefully, or make another character and play that character in that map to get value from it, and so on and so on.
All right. I always have to ask, party play, how does it work in Crucible?
So it fully works in a party. Everyone gets experience.
Oh,
Basically, you must channel an item at the encounter at least a little bit to be rewarded for it. So there's the molten circle, as you've seen, and basically the players step inside and you choose an item and channel it. And all the channeling makes the encounter harder and more rewarding and so on. And as long as you've contributed at least a second of channeling or whatever, you're going to be taking part in it. Once anyone who is channeled steps outside of the molten ring, a countdown starts which will trigger the encounter. And it's worth noting that throughout maps, that means you can fully engage with these without any problem or loss. Like, sure, maybe, some annoying party member will make the encounter way too hard for everyone, but they have the ability to do that elsewhere in the game too. In endgame maps, each map only allows the map owner to use its crafting benches. So one geode equals one map equals one craft. You can bring your friends, they can get stuff from it, but they can't use that craft unless they contributed the map.
Some more questions from chat.
I think he
How
means
does,
the specific ones
item
with the
level and
special
map tier
things, not
affect Crucible.
not
Can
like
you
regular
farm
in-game
item level
maps.
86 weapons, they ask.
All right.
The low level areas have way less Crucible experience.
So low-level areas give quite a lot less Crucible experience. There's an exponential curve on that to encourage you. Like, if you're playing somewhere 10 levels under you, you're certainly going to have a much better time.
I mean, you
just
always
getting
want to be
into the
doing
maps that you're
T16
playing.
maps, right?
Any other aspects that are worth mentioning?
Item level affects how much experience are required to level up.
That's true. So the item level does affect experience costs for hitting certain skills. And of course, I believe that certain skills are gated behind certain levels as well, right? You really do want to be playing higher level stuff. Like, maybe there's some niche place where you can get access to a certain
I
skill.
wonder
and it
if
isn't too
item
expensive to
level
get it, and you
86
can quarry farm more
items will
efficiently, but
matter.
you're kind of wasting your time doing that compared to just playing the maps that. In an old version of Path of Exile, where map scarcity was more of a thing, like in, say, Ruthless, where it's actually hard to play maps because it economically destroys you to play too many, then fair enough, quarry farming might be a more reasonable strategy. But I think that in contemporary mainline Path of Exile, you're wasting your time if you're spending too long in the quarry here.
Now, the mobs that you spawn with the channeling of the Crucible, are these different to normal mobs, or are they enhanced versions of regular mobs? And either way, are they something that you can turn into a Spectre, for example? Summoner players would like to know.
There's a few questions there. So they are actually themed around the properties of the item, which is interesting. Like, there's a light correlation between what you've got on the item you're channeling. This is some subtlety here, but they are special. And in general, for these leagues, we try to draw monsters from the pool that are in the area, or at least, the models of those monsters, just for memory reasons and so on. Is there anything else that's special about these monsters here, aside from the fact that they're quite a lot harder if you make the encounter hard?
Yeah, they have new skills. And they are spectrable.
Yeah, so all spectrable, all have new skills. There is essentially a separate set of Crucible monsters.
None of that is what I expected.
I actually personally underestimated how important new monsters are for league design. Like, we've done a lot of these leagues, like 38 or 39, and if you sat me in a room alone without any other devs and got me to list what goes into a league, I'd forget new monsters. But a lot of people here realize it's critical to have it so the texture of the moment.
Are people really playing pure Spectre builds anymore? Kind of feels like they've been killed.
That's been quite interesting. That's something that it honestly took me a lot of years of development of Path of Exile before I realized how important that was.
You said the modifiers on the item affect what monsters spawn. That's such a clever, nuanced
tree modifiers, like
okay,
what
yeah.
the tree that you're leveling up.
Cool.
You'll see what we mean. It's not a big deal. It's just cute.
I mean, that's what I mean. Like, that's really cute. Like, it's a cute detail, a nuance that I wouldn't have expected. Neat.
I know we're rushed to make these expansions in the cycle time we have, but we do get time to finesse the details. And interestingly, this cycle has been 17 weeks, so we've had a few extra weeks to get it right. And yeah, I don't mean to prematurely curse anything, but we're actually looking at a pretty good place quality-wise. Like, the number of issues we have open in our tracker and the stress on the team is significantly lower than it has been at various points. Like, I think yesterday, when we're at the point where we would in the past have had 250 open issues, we're at like 87 by my count. And so, I'm not seeing overtime being done outside of a little bit of preparation for the live stream the last few evenings. And so that's looking pretty good. I think that, like the incursion launch, we're going to be hitting it with like a bit of time to spare and make sure everything's good.
That's excellent to hear, and
Yeah.
details like that, nuances like that as well. I think they really add to the like flavor of it. You know, this weapon that you've been working on for a while is going to feel different to craft than a different weapon in a subtle way that you might not even put your finger on, and that's quite cool. So let's move on to a league revamps topic now. So the breach revamp, I feel, is actually a really clever way of dealing with the issue of like old content bloat, or of the game being too overwhelming for new players.
I mean, 4 different
Revamped old
kinds
content,
of
shifted up to a higher level, where
5
it's
different kinds of
discovered
breach
later and
stones.
less
Oh my
likely
god,
to
it was a
overwhelm those newer
mess.
players. Now, was this the intention here, or just a happy side effect?
It's a happy side effect, but one that we definitely acknowledge. So the basic way that the breach revamp happened was we started by saying, man, there are a lot of splinters in breach, and it feels crap to click on every splinter, and they kind of are worthless because you're working towards a breach
Yes,
stone
oh
when you
my
pick up a bunch of them,
god.
and that breach stone is going to be lower level than you are right now. Like, you're not going to care about that breach stone. You're going to want to upgrade it multiple times before you can run it. So how do we fix this? We thought, wouldn't it be cool if splinters were rarer, so they're impactful and there's less clicks, and they actually led to something immediately good?
I like that.
And
I
so we
honestly
realized,
hadn't
oh,
really
look, let's
thought
take
about
breach stones
this
and just
until
like
just
bump it up a
now.
bunch of levels and basically make breach stones themselves valuable, because in their current form it's like based around an old version of Path of Exile. And then we realized we can just remove 3 tiers of breach stones in this case, and we just cascaded the chain of tidy ups from there until eventually breach is pitched at way more impactful, you know, tighter than before, higher power level, more valuable splinters, and that's where we ended up.
Will you still have to do things like click breach hands in the thick of combat and like pick up those kind of scattered drops afterwards?
Yes, you do. And we think that clicking chests during the hectic combat with the chests vanish at the end is actually part of the fun of Breach. Like, here is a glimpse into another world where monsters are rushing in from all directions. What can you get? Can you kill them in time? Can you get the chests? Blah, blah,
I
blah.
mean, with the controller, it's a huge pain
It's part of
because
the
it won't
challenge of
target the breach
short
hands
flash encounter
correctly,
here,
which has
is to
been
get as many items you can through
the
whatever
bane
means.
of my
And so we didn't want to make it
existence.
so it automatically gives you your entitlement of chest items at the end. Now, picking up scattered items is annoying. I get that, right? There's no, you know, this is not an intentional thing that we're trying to make the player have to run around afterwards and look to see if stuff drops. But we didn't find any good solutions that solved all cases, right? Like, during this process, there wasn't an easy way of sorting that out that fit in with the other changes we're making. But we're going to keep an eye out on feedback. It's certainly something we're open to changing in the future if we find a good solution.
The Abyss revamp looks great. I don't really have any specific questions about that one. Maybe chat will. But can we hope to see similar quality passes on more dated things in the future? Like, for example, Harbinger, maybe?
Yeah, it's very likely. No promises though on when. Like for 3.22, we haven't scoped out what in-game improvements are looking like yet, so it could well include Harbinger, or definitely not, and we don't know yet.
I mean, Harbinger
And
would
back
just
to
be
that kind of
removing all the
initial
worthless shards,
question,
right?
which was the idea of like content bloat or things being a bit overwhelming for new players. Is this something that you guys recognize as a major issue, especially in the lead up to Path of Exile 2 with a bunch of new players on the way potentially?
We're always aware of the fact that Path of Exile is a complicated game with a lot of stuff going on, and your point about raising the level of breach to take it away from, you know, your introduction to maps is very valid. It becomes a thing where you know Path of Exile pretty well by the point that it's introduced, and it's difficult towing the line between how to describe this. It's difficult towing the line between lots of content being available and content being introduced at a slow pace. One of our competitive advantages versus other action RPGs is the fact we have a vast library of old content that's fleshed out. But on the other hand, that can be a problem because for new players, when they have to understand 20 complicated systems or 50 complicated systems, it's sometimes easier to play other games that require less learning. So we're trying to make sure that many of these do actually feel pretty optional and you get them, you know, it's no problem for them to learn how Breach works several weeks into playing potentially.
A bunch of people are also asking if there's any news on Ultimatum.
Yeah.
We have mentioned in the past that we have a plan for Ultimatum. That plan is definitely still happening, but not part of 3.21.
Oh my
Fair
god.
enough.
We're gonna get that same sentence every league.
Maybe it'll be announced at ExileCon.
Oh
Maybe.
god.
Okay. Is Ritual being looked at for improvement? It got hit pretty bad due to the removal of +1 monster level watchstones. This question from chat.
It hasn't been discussed yet, but as I mentioned, we haven't worked out the next set of in-game improvements, so fair enough. It'll be on the list to look at.
Yeah, Ritual needs some work.
Is there any plans to change Blight? Atlas Tree notables, half of them are there to guarantee Blight events when there's already Sextants and Scarabs?
We actually did some a pretty deep look at Blight on the Atlas tree a few months ago, and there were some inconsistencies we wanted to tidy up. Again, I can't promise that's in scope for 3.22, but
They have
yeah,
to
it
like
certainly
hot
is something
fix
that we
some
probably need
blight
to
stuff
evaluate.
during Sanctum
Alright.
because they
Talking a
didn't
bit
work.
about now masteries and ascendancies, is there's some pretty
Mm-hmm.
big announcements there. One in particular that like really impressed me was the life mastery that gives 15% life if your body armor has no life on it. That kind of feels like a game changer in some ways. Body armor has always had really fierce competition, and whether something has life or not is a big part of the like evaluation there. So I really like this design overall, but we do have some unique items that have 5 to 10% increased life, and I imagine that might feel like a bit of a bummer if you want to use one of those.
Well, in that case, you save yourself a passive point, and you get to, go pick a different mastery, and there are some powerful ones to pick instead.
That's
We're
true.
not
A lot of
intending
the other ones.
we're not intending to go and remove life off those because of the presence of the mastery. That would feel pretty mandatory.
That'd be such a funny way to solve that problem.
Yes.
Find that no life. Now this consolation style design,
You get
that
a
like makes
unique
up
with
for the
like a scourge
shortfall, feels like
modifier
kind of
that's
new ground
exactly the
here,
negative
and
amount of
it might have
life
some
that's
potential
on the
use cases
unique,
in
so
other
it gives
areas.
0
Like for
life, so you
example,
can
the
get
idea
the
of 20%
mastery.
increased movement speed, but both masteries don't have movement
Oh
speed.
god.
Is this something you'd consider expanding out with in other areas?
It's currently just on the life mastery. I mean, we've got other interesting new designs on the other masteries, of course, and it is a possibility for later, but we want to be careful with this one because, like in the boots case, for example, I worry that soon you'd pick, the masteries that make your gear good, and then it doesn't really matter what your items are, as long as you, for the love of God, don't roll that movement speed or life. And that's kind of against most of how people are trained to create items in Path of Exile. So we're experimenting with body armors with life, but other things follow normal rules for a while.
Yeah, it is. It does seem kind of like an experimental thing because you're right. Like it could go the other way to what you want, where it's like warping perceptions of items in unpleasant ways potentially. So interesting. I'll be keen to see how this one goes then. A lot of the other masteries look really impactful as well. I was pretty surprised to see instant leech after that being such an issue in the past, for
Yeah.
example. A lot of people have been hoping for like a meta shakeup in terms of changing
I
skills
mean,
specifically, but
instant
here we're
leech
getting like
seems
large,
pretty
like a bunch of morale skills
bonkers.
obviously have an impact, and then like all of these masteries and passive changes and stuff like that. Now, what factors kind of go into deciding whether you want to rebalance a skill or the other things like gear and passives around a build, rather?
So regarding the meta shakeup, we could at any point go and pick a bunch of skills and alter their damage values and so on. And we've done that in the past, and it hasn't really been as impactful as we wanted. Often, what will happen if we buff things that are underused is people don't immediately notice, and then a while later, someone stumbles across it, and that doesn't immediately cause the feeling of a new meta that people wanted. It feels like the same meta, even though there's stuff they haven't found. And so we wanted to try in this case, leaving the skills alone for the most part. I mean, there's skill balance. You'll read it in the patch notes in a little while. But for the most part, a lot of the changes come from the fact that broadly many of the masteries have been changed. Two specific ascendancies have been changed. You've got a lot of new Val skills for many different builds, and the masteries in particular have a big impact here because they're right in your face when you're doing your tree planning. You certainly see all of these interesting new ways of building. Like an example is, let's look at stun for a second, right? Previously, everything to do with stun in the game was about how do I make it happen less and how do I have it affect my character less, right? Shorter stuns less frequently. There's stun stuff now, which encourages you to get stunned if you want to build that way. There's a passive that gives you adrenaline for like 2 seconds per 100 milliseconds of stun, I think. Is that right? Yeah. So if you can find a way of having 350 milliseconds of stun inflicted on you every 7 seconds, then you've got adrenaline permanently. And sure, that may not even be a good build, but it's a build you could do. And so we're trying with these masteries to cause people to
Yeah,
completely
I don't know
rethink
about
how they
that.
interact with these mechanics. To answer your question, though, about how what factors decide whether we rebalance a skill or other things, we haven't done a Passover mastery since they were first released, and so they weren't what we would call like modernized. And so before we go and just tweak numbers on a skill, we want to make sure that the supporting systems have been modernized. Like the breach thing, for example, which isn't a meta change, that had been a while before it had been modernized, and so it's sitting there just kind of out of whack with the rest of the game. It's not worth running until now. And so we wanted to make sure the masteries were really good scaffolding for builds before we went to tweak individual numbers.
Very cool. I wanted to deep dive a little bit into the design theory behind Saboteur.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pretty initially skeptical of the idea of like adding nodes that aren't about traps or mines, the core identity there. But those trigger bots look pretty awesome.
They
Kinda
do
changing them a
look
little
pretty
bit.
awesome.
They're
I'm
quite
pretty
unique.
hyped about that.
How do you go about making sure that the rest of an ascendancy feels up to the task and has some choices for players to make? So, for example, you've got like Perfect Crime, the
Kind of
bots,
feels
and
like
like
there's not a
Clockwork and
lot to
cooldowns.
talk about
Both are
here
really
in this
great. And then you've got some
Q&A
other
as
more
far as the
contextual
new league
nodes,
mechanic
explosives
goes.
at work,
Like,
Expert and Bomb Specialist. Those are like limited to crit or cold AoE builds, for example. But they're still potentially usable. But then everything else is traps and mines, that core identity. There's like such a big divide between the two play styles there that there's not really any overlap in the nodes. So you potentially run into an issue where when you do something like this, you have no real choices to make because all of them you've only got the choices that make sense for the build and the others are completely irrelevant. So that feels like a potentially a little bit one-dimensional for Path of Exile. So kind of how do you get to this point?
There's been a lot of iteration of a Saboteur, including recently. Like, we had a version in the live stream that we're ready to prepare, we're confident in, and we're good to go. And there was enough internal kind of, it might be perceived as a nerf going on that we went and changed it further, made sure that it was, we were much more comfortable with it, added more. Did we add entire nodes to it, or we literally added a node to it to make sure that there was more choice and that it worked better? Refilmed the sections of the live stream, got me back in the recording studio to do the voiceover of that, and updated the live stream at the last minute because we want to make sure that the different builds work. And the Saboteur is a little bit of a different experience than before because it now has these other options. But it also, and most importantly, is not the only way to play traps and mines. Our goal here is that if the word trap or mine comes up in your build guide, it doesn't 100%
is
have an
it gonna be
association
the
with
only
Saboteur.
way to
There are
play
trap and mine
Spell
builds
Slinger
with other
though?
ascendancies now.
Because
Like with Necromancer, how if you want to use minions, it's possible to come up with minion builds that are on a different ascendancy. And so the Saboteur is the obvious place to go for easy access to trap and mine power, as well as like trigger stuff, right? It's the first point of call, but it certainly isn't the final point of call for people who want to do some really wacky stuff.
Yeah, and that kind of like raises a good counterpoint, which is like, while there might not be a bunch of different choices for trigger builds in Saboteur besides the ones laid out, you have all of the other classes to decide. So picking Saboteur in the first place is that choice. So
Yes.
that and fun new playstyles added.
The trigger bots are pretty OP.
They look awesome.
they do
So
look
cool.
OP. Like, they look really OP.
Does the passive reworks to two classes affect Ascendant at all?
Did we change the Ascendant?
Yes, we did.
Yep. That's cool. I
Awesome.
didn't know that. Good work. Yes, we have.
Good job, background devs.
I want to look at that now.
Do you folks plan on changing passives around the tree or just the masteries that are changing?
Yeah, there are passives that have changed around the tree,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, there's new clusters, and I mean, the patch notes, which will be posted as soon as we stop talking, have all the details, but it was mentioned in the live stream too, just in passing.
Yeah.
Like how I mentioned early game balance changes, and then everyone comes to me and says, why are you not talking about the early game balance changes on the live stream?
Yeah,
sure
there was life
do.
recovery clusters. There was a few new clusters scattered around to increase access to masteries, and there was +1 projectiles.
Yep.
So that was pretty spicy. Okay. Here's a question about the Sab. If Sabo trigger bots trigger your spells on them, how do those trigger bots cost mana to trigger?
Oh
Or
god.
do those spells cost
Yeah.
mana?
Like regular triggering, right? Yeah, it's just like regular
Oh.
triggering. The difference is there are two trigger bots. They run at the enemies like you'd expect. It triggers from
So it
both of them,
triples your mana
and
cost?
instead of just purely doubling your damage and moving it onto the enemies, there is this minor damage penalty so that it's not quite, literally double damage, but still obviously is a big boost.
Alright.
But it is
That's
double the
about
mana
all the random
cost.
questions. You mentioned a fair amount of early game changes that change the racing meta, though this is the sort of thing that affects everyone. So, what sort of early game changes can we expect? And by the way, Bex, let's flip something involving support gems. Sorry.
Yeah. So we actually have another whole skill gem and 3 support gems that we didn't even talk about in the live stream. It's 1 main skill and 3 supports, right, guys? Snipe, Mana Forged Arrows, Prismatic Burst, Momentum, I think. Yeah.
What?
So
They didn't even mention that.
it's interesting how this happens, really, but we and ahed about what to do about the ExileCon races for so long, right? Because we didn't want to just say, oh, look, it's the same Katavikil as last time, go. Because then we get exactly the same race with exactly the same racers, and it's just a repeat of the 2019 event. But at the same time, when we looked at other wacky races we could do, they didn't feel like Path of Exile. Like, Path of Exile Racing is a celebration of how quickly can you play through the game without wacky mods involved.
And so people, when we asked them what they liked about watching the races at ExileCon, was the fact that the races are doing everything that the normal players are doing just so well. Like, they're just so optimized with their stuff. So we wanted to make sure they were playing true Path of Exile. The problem is true Path of Exile is more or less pretty similar to what it was in 2019. So we said, well, what if the racing strategy is different? What if we just went and improved the early game in a way that doesn't have significant impact on the actual meta of the late game, and just did a whole bunch of tidy up in ways that really affect races? And that way, the racers can play 3.21, which is released in a week. We'll do all the qualifiers during 3.21, and that's also the version of Path of Exile that's live at ExileCon, because 3.22 is coming out a couple of weeks after ExileCon. So it perfectly fits a consistent set of balance that we can keep the same for fairness. And so many changes were made, and this involved some pretty radical stuff. Controversially, and this is explained better in the patch notes, we've removed the Onslaught support gem from early game situations. Honestly, the patch notes do a much better job than I do of explaining it, but in return, other gems have been introduced which achieve similar goals to it. And so I'd recommend reading the patch notes for the full detail, but there are several new gems which do affect in-game builds, and that they're now options you have available. The favorite one that I was reading about recently was this cool, like, semi-active, semi-support gem, which is called Snipe, which our internal description, that has probably been improved since this was written, was channel to charge up your bow, gaining stages. Release to trigger one linked bow skill for each stage gained. And a few other caveats.
Doesn't like
So
a
basically, you can channel and then release a bunch of bow skills at the same time. So cool stuff like that has come out of this. And yeah, it's, balance changes. There's going to be some nerfs in there. There's going to be some buffs, but they do not have a large impact on endgame Path of Exile. So do, when reading the patch notes, take it with a bit of a grain of salt at the fact that it's aimed at the early game.
This is interesting because, like, in the past, the idea was talked about of having like some skills that were like the low level ones, and then potentially would transition them out of it. But it's not something that's really true to Path of Exile very often. Like, most of the time, most things that you can use in early game are end game viable as well. So this is kind of more a design of having some things that potentially are very early game and not really necessarily intended for late game.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll explore like skills more in that realm in the future as well? And is that, I don't know, something that Path of Exile 2 will feature more?
Well, Path of Exile 2 gives us an opportunity to somewhat tidy up what skills there are, and we're moving things around between levels and basically having a chance to, because it's a game that obviously involves many changes, having a chance to actually review stuff. So that helps.
Someone who's not in racing, none of this feels super relevant.
Obviously, we can make
outside
those changes,
of like
in current Path of
some
Exile 1,
gems might
comes at a
be
cost where we take
available at different
something and break it
times.
for high levels, or take it away from early levels, and suddenly builds say, hey, I was using that, and there's certainly a live cost to that.
Now, I see a few things come up in chat repeatedly, so I'll touch on those. Some other Ascendancy players. What was that?
I was asking, they want us to log in.
That's certainly that.
Okay.
There's a few other Ascendancy players who want reassurance that their Ascendancy will be addressed. I see Gladiator mentioned a lot.
Yeah, we could list the 17 Ascendancies. We don't yet know which ones are coming. Shall I tell a story? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
Patch notes. We're getting story time instead.
Chris is going off script.
We wanted to nerf all the Ascendancies in Ruthless for power reasons. And so we looked into what that would involve. Pretty quick numeric nerfs. And while doing so, we came up with a whole bunch of new interesting stats. And we said, okay, well, we cannot release these stats in just Ruthless, right? Because that would be crazy. The community who already have low patience for any Ruthless stuff that we do would certainly find it unfair that we gave Ruthless a bunch of new interesting tools alongside a pile of nerfs. So we said, why don't we change all the Ascendancies in the core game to use these new stats as well? Not nerfing them, just making them like we've done with the Pathfinder and the Saboteur here. And so we started on that. And the plan was to do about half the Ascendancies in 3.21, and then also do all the Ruthless ones at the same time, figuring that's fair because there's enough stuff given to the base game. Unfortunately, we didn't get it to a state where it would actually be releasable. Many of those Ascendancies were going well, but they weren't quite finished. The internal feedback was to the point where it felt a little bit like a nerf in some cases, or it felt too much like a buff, or we weren't quite there, and we obviously can't release it unless we've had time. So then we had a situation where we're really happy with Pathfinder and Saboteur. They're going great. And all the Ruthless ones are sitting there with new stats on them. And so we intentionally undid all the Ruthless changes there to stop there being an outcry, and so that we get more time to sit on it and work out what we're doing in the base game. And so the intention is that we do have
stockpiled a large number of ascendancy changes from when we get time to do it properly, which hopefully will include
Ooh.
many in 3.22. And we just have to work out politically what we do with said ruthless changes, because I would love to release them. I mean, they're not quite ready. Like, I'm not saying we want permission to put them in 3.21, but we're at some stage likely to debut that set of stuff because we do feel the power level of ascendancies and ruthless is too high relative to items. And so, long story short, in answer to the question of when do the other ascendancy classes get some love, the love is half done. And so, yeah, it's coming.
The love is half
The
done.
political intricacies at play.
Okay,
here.
so we're getting a lot of ascendancy
it's just-
revamps
the
in
problem is, like,
3.22
while
then.
this expansion ended up with a lot of balance changes, and we're not worried about that, there was a time period when we hadn't piled in so many balance changes where it looked like half the work went towards Ruthless. And that's not a good look, because it's done for the purpose of the core game. It's just if you release it in Ruthless first, you just upset everyone for no reason. And so there's a bit of politics with that, but at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that all the players feel equally valued.
Since you brought it up, let's chat Ruthless a little bit briefly. Will it have its own unique cosmetic rewards now that it's getting challenges? And if so, how many?
It has the same cosmetic rewards as the base game.
Oh,
This is
okay.
another case here of trying to go for fairness. You can either earn the cool armor set by playing regular Path of Exile or by playing Ruthless. I don't know which is easier. There are fewer challenges in Ruthless, but it's quite hard to do those in Ruthless.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's difficult to say. I recommend working out what your capabilities are and doing it in that mode. And there is a different totem flag. So if you do complete the challenges in Ruthless and in the base game, you technically get 2 hideout totems to show that you did.
Oh boy, all those
A bunch of
completionists
people
got to
have
do
had
it
a
all
chance to
again.
play
Ruthless.
and try it out. There's been some discussion of the difficulty and whether it's a fun type of difficulty or rather where it's just slower. How do you feel about the initial version of how it's played out and the types of challenge that it offers?
We really like it internally. It emphasizes how fun items can be to find when you're desperately craving upgrades. Like, I get that it's not for everyone, they don't have to play it, but it's an experience of overcoming scarcity and feeling every upgrade to your character that we think is a really valuable thing. And what's interesting is some people, when playing it, say, to be honest, regular Path of Exile, like baseline Path of Exile that a new player installs, could actually be Ruthless, and they might have a better time than the overcrowded, very complicated mainline version that we currently have. Now, we don't plan to make that change where we swap them around, just in terms of what the new player experience people get, but it is true that if you're sitting someone down for the first time, they get a bit more of a meaningful and less complicated experience playing in that mode. Having said that, it's still an experiment, it's still a passion project that we're tinkering away with, but it also educates us a lot on the appropriate balance for item mods and how, like the fact that Eternal Orbs could come back, for example, is a realization we made that was actually pretty cool. And looking at the consequences of the different types of crafting and how they interact has been very instrumental for us. And this is all important because we have to get this stuff right with the upcoming Path of Exile 2 balance, right? We have to make sure that Path of Exile 2 is balanced as a great game from the start.
It's almost like it's a useful dev tool more than anything in that regard.
I mean, I've been playing
Yeah,
Last
and there's a growing
Epoch
community
lately,
of people
and
enjoying it, which is why
I
we've
can
got
kind of
the,
see where
the
Chris
boss
is
kill
coming
race
from
happening
here
in Ruthless.
because
I know that'll be controversial to some players who don't particularly want to play it, but they weren't going to win that race anyway, right? Like the people who are going to win that race know why we're putting it in Ruthless.
Oh no.
it really does feel better in an ARPG to like
We also don't know if it even
have
is
these
winnable.
garbage
Like, to
items.
emphasize here, Ruthless,
So
Solo
I
Self-Bound,
kind of
Hardcore,
agree.
both pinnacle bosses, right? That's hard.
Yeah.
There's a ticking clock before those ExileCon tickets aren't valid anymore, right? The events
It would take me that entire time to get there, that's for sure. For my own experience, a lot of the early game feelings I had echoed what you were talking about, with like the changes were very effective in making you really like feel gear upgrades and think about how you play your character, and those sorts of challenge changes were really effective. For me, though, where it fell apart was actually at that end game, where the scarcity, the economy, and the map drops were so slow that even when I felt ready, I couldn't really progress in endgame at what I felt like it was a reasonable pace. Even dedicating the entirety of my currency supply towards maps, I was still kind of blanking and dropping back down to low white tier maps. And I've seen plenty of people break through this wall, so it's certainly possible, but it is slow and it bears mentioning, I think. How do you feel about like the end game progression there?
So we've made some adjustments to this in 3.21, but we don't want to overshoot the mark. Like, we don't want to just dramatically swing something in a way that makes maps sustain too easy.
Maybe I
It is intentional
pass on
that
Ruthless for
maintaining the
another
highest
league.
maps requires significant economic sacrifice in Ruthless, which, as you say, some people can break through. But it's essentially the case that you almost have to just pay, a very high price to be playing red maps repeatedly, and that's in the right direction for Ruthless, and we do want it to be a little more accessible than it currently is. So I'm hoping the changes in 3.21 do help a bit there, but we'll keep nudging it. We just don't want to accidentally get it to the point where everyone's got expectations of sitting in red maps like they do in the base game.
All right, so potentially some smaller changes there, fine tuning things out. The Atlas tree is different in Ruthless. Chat wants to know if we'll be getting gateways there as well.
Yep.
Cool. Very nice.
I mean,
We have
Atlas
a
passive,
random eclectic
trees are going to be completely
mix
different the
of
way you
chat
path through them.
questions now. So I'm just gonna jump straight into these. I have not seen what they are yet, so let's have a go. A lucky dip. Do we need to equip the weapon to level it in Crucible, or can we use any weapon in our inventory?
It has to be equipped, but it can be on your weapon swap. The intention here is that you can't be playing, say, a bow character and have some really high level wand that you're necessarily working on without sacrifice. You are making things for you. And this is also so that you're guaranteed to be carrying the item around with you. You're not having to sacrifice inventory space for it. There's a bunch of things that went into that decision, but essentially, yeah, stick the item on your weapon
That would be
swap
really
if it's
annoying.
not the primary one you're currently using.
Does that work if the item's disabled? Because you can do some stuff where you like put an Astramentus on and then equip the item and then take the Astramentus off and it goes red, but it's still equipped.
We'll find out.
Okay. Now chat's just doing the classic Q&A thing where they're spamming melee question mark. Like there's a question there. You do know that questions involve a few more words than that usually, but maybe that's enough for you to work off.
I mean, the answer is no, probably.
So in the last expansion,
Melee,
we
no.
introduced a large number of Val skills and some other melee changes. And so the intention with the melee Val skills was to raise the power level of all of those skills because periodically you get to play them in God mode for a few seconds. And we haven't made as many melee changes in this particular release here, and that's partly because there are, the other 90% of players also would like balance changes. So we definitely have it on the radar to keep an eye on, but there's nothing else in 3.21 apart from what you'll see in the patch notes rather soon.
Yep, so advanced skills and masteries and a couple fine tunes here. So have a read in a second when I stop talking. What happens if you animate a weapon with a Crucible tree? Whoa.
It works.
It works.
Oh,
Do you expect
Okay.
this from Path of Exile?
No, I expected it to work. Actually, I'm impressed because I imagine there's some complicated things there. But
I shouldn't have done a dev check there.
Oh
I should have
man, what about
eye contact
animated
with the camera.
guardians
It
then?
works, and then quickly.
I wonder if there's anything
to make it work.
Is there anything interesting you can do there with an
Even
animated
things that,
guardian?
Like, allocate passives. Does that work? Because they don't have a passive tree, right? Surely those don't work.
There's the ones that make sense for it to work will work, but I don't think. Oh, like Master Fletcher, for example, right?
Oh.
It should work. Like at the end of the day, right? Animated guardians and animated weapons are just like entities that get stats, right? Like if you give an animated weapon +1 arrows or something, it's gonna fire +1 arrows, like a monster would, like the player would.
Oh man.
Yeah, but you're giving it a passive that then gives the +1 arrows. That implies they have a passive tree. Does that imply they have a soul?
Oh, it's technically that we're not giving it the passive. We're giving it the stat and we're calling it the passive. But we're getting into like internals here. Maybe we are giving it. Anyway, we're fine. It'll work.
Do animate guardians have souls?
That raises ethical questions.
Oh god, okay.
I mean, I felt real sad when the animated guardian died in Sanctum, so
Does things like pack size?
I'm gonna go with yes, they have
Yes,
souls.
map modifiers,
I certainly mourned its
So
loss.
here's an interesting one. The items that are shown in the live stream do include pack size on those the rare maps there. And that doesn't affect the
So in the in-game area, pack size doesn't exist. In regular maps, pack size does influence the value of the monsters being spawned.
Right, okay. Yep, so the bit I was getting at was more of a side point, which is that pack size doesn't exist on the endgame maps that, the Crucible specific ones. The pictures on the live stream do show it. That's because we hadn't removed it at that stage, and this is because it had no way of really juicing up the size of the encounters you're finding there, so we went with quantum rarity instead. With regard to
with regard to the base game, if you get pack size on your maps, it will increase the value of the Crucible monsters in their encounters, so it is beneficial to have it.
Okay.
Once upon a time, GG entertained the idea of permanent skin transfers, destroying an item to create a permanent NTX. Is there any word on this, or has it been abandoned as unfeasible?
It's hard, and we haven't done it yet, but it's certainly something that we don't have philosophical problems with.
Okay.
That was a quick one.
All right, chat. You been spamming anything else?
I'm gonna go log in.
Recombinators.
Yeah, log in. Is that the spam?
Play some
Everyone
Crucible.
spam
Still
recombinators.
typing melee.
When
Still-
recombinators coming back, please, please, GGG.
Any changes planned for expedition gear? What's next with Ward?
I'm unaware of any changes planned for Expedition gear at the moment. I mean, at this stage, it's pretty much a matter of they can read the patch notes in a couple of minutes, and that will answer, and Control F Ward, right? And otherwise, keep posting feedback about what stuff you'd like to see changes to, and we'll look into it for the upcoming
Recombinators.
Perfect. Well,
Give
let's
them
find out.
back.
People want to know if fishing rods will have crucible trees, Chris.
I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to let them work it out.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Chris. Thanks for
You're
the
welcome.
Q&A.
It's been great.
Pleasure as always.
Thanks so much.
All right, see you fun folks later. Bye-bye.
All right, well, not much to learn from that Q&A, I think. It was pretty much, League seems pretty self-explanatory. Although, knowing that we can chance an Ancient Orb items that already have skill trees, it feels like that might end up being the best way to get some insanely OP skill tree onto a unique you want, especially if it's a relatively common one, because you can just do the whole farm up merging thing in your offhands with just rare items, and then just, spam chance until it turns into unique, and then spam ancient orbs. I mean, presumably, this only works if it's like a relatively common unique. If you want something that's really rare or like a boss drop one, then obviously it doesn't work. But being able to lock in the skill tree first and then turn it into the unique you want certainly seems a lot better than acquiring like hundreds of that unique item and doing this special map like 100 times and then merging them 100 times. Like, it feels like that's going to be prohibitively expensive and extremely time consuming compared to just buying a bunch of ancient orbs from people farming Harbinger, because I farmed a lot of Harbinger in Sanctum and you get a lot of ancient orbs. Like, ancient orbs are pretty much my primary like money maker from Harbinger, and honestly, it's probably gonna make Harbinger a lot better if there's a much more demand for ancient orbs. But like, you can easily just spam them, get something common. So that was a big revelation from the Q&A. But other than that, it all seemed pretty much in line with what I expected from the reveal. They were very coy about what is going to be in that sort of higher tier of the endgame Crucible maps that have these special modifiers. So what's available on there could be really impactful for how we actually end up going about making these items. Like, there could be things there that put specific passives on, or like transform them, or do all sorts of wacky stuff. And specific modifiers there could end up being like, they could really warp how we interact with this league mechanic. But generally speaking, I don't think it's a less exciting league mechanic than I'd hoped for when I saw the name Crucible and I thought it was a crafting league, and it kind of is, but not really in the way that Harvest and Recombinators were. So looks good. I'm excited. It looks like it's going to be fun. The base game's in a great place right now anyway, so Path of Exile is going to be fun regardless. And having Abyss and Breach sort of like moves back into the area where I would consider actually farming them is interesting. It seems like it'll be a lot more fun. Having Splinters be worth picking up. I'm very interested in digging into those changes in the patch notes and also seeing what they did with the betrayal research, because that could be a big nerf to betrayal if you can't upgrade breach stones that way anymore. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Breach. Zoom in a bit. The number of breach winners dropped are now affected by increased reductions to item quantity. Wait a second, were they not before? Oh my god. Experience gained from killing breach monster maps has been reduced. Rebalanced as you're encountering more of them. Breach winner drops reduced. But that's just because the base breach stone has been buffed, so it makes sense to nerf the drop rate of the splinters. Yeah, they're all monster level 81. They're all higher than the old Chayu was. I mean, obviously this makes breach blessings significantly better. If we still have that Atlas passive that lets us get the breach blessings, that'll be very, very good now. I'm assuming it was nerfed. Most breachstone bosses can no longer drop breach blessings or unupgraded breach uniques. Huh. I guess that makes sense, because one blessing would be enough to always run a flawless breachstone then, because it would just always sustain the breach blessing. Even invitations are a bit worse. I mean, this is a buff to Kirak, because the breachstones will be better, and the value of a blessing will be higher than it was before. I don't know if that's really going to be more valuable. If anything, this Harvest Craft is going to be worse because the value of the least valuable Breachstone is going to be significantly higher than it was before. Hit Dead Flood's Betrayal Research Safehouse rewards are now map device crafting options that can be used on Breachstones. What? Are now map device crafting options that can be used on breachstones. As in, they go to your map device and then you can then select one of them when you put the breachstone in, or that it crafts onto the breachstone. Because flawless breachstones can be crafted on like they're a map. It kind of sounds like it, the first one though, where it's just going to go on the Atlas device and be something you can select whenever you run a breachstone. That's a huge nerf, but it's interesting. Gonna have to look into that and see what the pool of available things are there, because there could be some fun stuff in there. The enchanted map modifier for defeating It That Fled on fortification duty now has... Okay, it doesn't... Whatever. Use splinters. Rare breach monsters have a 0.5% to drop an additional breach blessing. Okay, so they just removed that. Okay, that's what I was wondering. So that's just gone. You can only get them from regular breachstones then. So is the only way to get a flawless from using a blessing on it, or is there another method? I think it also drops from the regular one, they said, right? Breach blessings can be used. Is there a way to naturally get flawless ones? Or can you only use them with the blessings? But this is a huge nerf. I mean, monster density is good if the splinter value's gone up. %5 chance to be flawless. Eh. I mean, 4% chance to drop a breachstone could be better than the previous 12%, given that a base breachstone is so much more valuable. So 10% faster, yikes. 20% increased chance of getting a boss. Wow. Wow. So a lot fewer bosses. Yikes. Kind of feels like maybe we're going to see how it plays out, but it kind of feels like a bit of a nerf. Oh, yikes. I mean, this is a huge nerf to the divination card that gives the, oh my god, what's it called? The corrupted armor that can only slot in corrupted gems that has a keystone when you upgrade it. Very powerful for Poison Spark builds. Yeah, wow. I mean, the two flat hands was just so strong. I mean, there's gonna be so many fewer of those divination cards in the economy just as a result of this one change. Oh, only 50% duplication for the bosses. Wow. Oh, but they moved the additional hands onto the scarabs. Huh. So if you're running scarabs, that makes sources of additional breaches stronger if it's on like the Atlas device for League or something. Very interesting. So depending on the sources, okay, so that actually makes that fled enchant and also the maps that come with an implicit that have breaches significantly stronger if you can then juice up all of those breaches with, say, a gilded scarab. Breach hands drop double breach winners. Yeah, okay, wow. So they murdered the low investment strategy here. You really want to be running scarabs if you're doing breaches. I'm not gonna look over the unique changes here. Abyss. Abyssal depths now always contain a lich. That's great. That'll actually be worth running now. I mean, this is so good for getting Stygian Vices early without having to actually run the stupid underground areas. I mean, I don't know how much Island level 86 Stygian Vices are going to be worth after this change, because there's going to be so many more of them. Like, you just kill an enemy that spawns, and you just get one if you have the node allocated. +1. Increased chance to have Aspire. Okay, it's interesting that they changed this as well to abysses in your maps that do not lead to an abyssal depths. So getting this node isn't actually hurting your chances of getting a boss. There was a weird thing with the abyss stuff before where specking to the sum of them could actually make like abyss worse for you, because like if you spec into stuff that made it more likely to lead to an abyss, but then also spec into the stuff that gave you more rewards killing abyss monsters inside the actual map outside of the abyss, the abyssal depths, then they actually like increasing your odds of that lowered the rewards you were getting. It was very bad. So this is good that they're no longer like cannibalizing each other anymore. The two small Alice passives. Chance to lead to abyssal depths and okay, yeah. Excellent. Rest of the uniques. Okay, so how do they change the scarabs? One additional abyss, so 50% increased monsters. Wow, okay, so it's only this doesn't get 100% anymore, because I believe it was 1 in 0, 1 in 50, and 1 in 100% before. City Square gone. No, City Square is still in. Excellent. Okay. Harbinger farming is still on the menu. Oh god, I am addicted to City Square. With that Harbinger sextant. Pain. Extra physical damage is chaos. Ooh. Oh, interesting. Being able to spec into extra Maven's invitations. Huh. Oh my god. The harvest crafting option that applies an enchantment to a non-unique map, causing it to not consume sextant charges, has been replaced with an enchantment for non-unique maps that provides a 50% chance to not consume sextant uses. Rip infinite sextant strategy. Oh god, that means for the Harbinger thing, I'm going to have to buy all, like, Harbinger sextants in bulk. People who bulk roll sextants are going to be making bank this league. Harbinger and Harvest stocks are both way down. Jeez. I don't really want to go over the passive changes. Let's see, anything else I want to go over? New content features. Snipe. Trigger one supported bow skill for each stage gained. Will it trigger the same one over and over again? Presumably. The trigger when you've spent amount of total mana on other bow attacks based on the supported skill's mana cost. What? Oh, wow. That seems powerful. That just lets you have an entire second setup that's automatically triggered as you use your regular bow skill. How? Especially because you can have one 6-link setup on your bow itself, that's your main skill. And then your body armor, you can have a whole second skill supported by Mana Forged Arrow. That seems crazy. Supports attacks, causing them to trigger the Prismatic Burst spell. Huh. Seems weird. Could be good for, what is it? The one Templar Ascendancy that specializes in both attacks and spells? Ooh, falling currencies now have a stack size of 20. Orb of Alchemy, Vol Orb, Chaos Orb, Tainted Chaos Orb, Eldritch Chaos, and Veiled Chaos. Nice. Oh, that's so good. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to look at now in this. Oh, Keurig mod's available. Okay, here we go. A bit essence for 3 chaos. 3 essences for 3 chaos. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is so insane. Oh, that's so insane. I mean, this is just the go-to. Oh my god, we have Harvest. Harvest for 12 chaos. Dear lord. Expedition's not bad too. I mean, start of league, this is just so much profit every single map you're expecting to essence. Like, just do this, Alkin go, pop all 4 of your essences. You're gonna be rolling in money. Okay, wow. It's interesting they just put this in the patch notes. Normally they announce this later. Okay, that's pretty much all I wanted to look at, though. So, thank you for showing up and watching the stream. This was really nice. I'm pretty excited to play more Path of Exile as usual. That's all for now. I'm going to have a lot of content coming out over the course of the next couple weeks, both covering the new league mechanic. I still want to put some guides out for old league mechanics, and definitely going to put out guides for these old revamped league mechanics, because I mean, people are going to need them. Things are going to be different. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you more in the weeks to come as we all enjoy the new Crucible League. Thank you for watching.